I want to make a recording of the words that are on the final, and as you can see, the list is up on the screen. And I want to talk about each organism and tell you some things to make sure you know. The important part is that you study everything we have in class and everything on your sheet, and then I'm just going to talk about some of these and some important things that you need to know for the test. Number one is Salmonella typhosa. And you know that in most cases we associate salmonella infection, salmonella gastroenteritis, with poultry products. And as a matter of fact, I heard on the news yesterday that there's an outbreak of salmonella in Colbert County, I believe is where it was. So it does cause gastroenteritis, and they do associate with poultry. However, this organism, Salmonella typhosa, is the cause of typhoid fever, and it is acquired from ingestion of the feces from someone who has been infected or is infected. Because after someone is infected and their symptoms disappear, it's possible for them to keep the organism in their gallbladder for several months, and it passes out in the feces. So in that case, in the case of Salmonella typhosa, it is a fecal oral, which means ingestion of feces contaminated with the organism. Number two is Yersinia pestis. It is the organism that causes the plague, and it is carried by the rat flea. So actually people are infected with the bite of the flea, and it is a rat flea or a flea that lives on a rat. Number three is Neisseria Meningitidis. This is a bacterial meningitis causer, and it is the organism that causes the most contagious bacterial meningitis. The most contagious bacterial meningitis. So if young, healthy people get bacterial meningitis, we suspect that it's caused from this organism, and it is a gram-negative coccus. A gram-negative coccus. Number four, Neisseria gonorrhea, is also going to be a gram-negative coccus. It causes the sexually transmitted disease, gonorrhea. Now, if gonorrhea is passed to a baby at birth, it can cause blindness. And as we studied in the material for test 3, they put silver nitrate, or now antibiotic drops, in the eyes of every newborn, always. Number 5 is Streptococcus Pyogenes. This is the organism that causes strep throat or streptococcal pharyngitis. Also, it's the number 1 organism associated with infections of the mother after childbirth, and that's called puerperal sepsis. It's a fever and that sort of thing. And it's also many times associated with infections from abortions. So, mainly we see it as the cause of strep throat. It is also the one that can also be skin eating or necrotizing to tissue, that you hear about, the skin eating flesh, the flesh eating bacteria, and it is gram-positive coccus, as are all the streps. Remember that there are more infections and more different infections caused by Streptococcus than any other genus. Streptococcus Pneumoniae is number 6. It's also gram-positive coccus because it's a strep. It is normal flora in 70% of the nasopharynx of people, and it causes the most common bacterial meningitis. What makes it so virulent is that it has a capsule. So it's the presence of that capsule or encapsulation that increases its virulence or increases its ability to cause disease. So if 70% of the population have it already in their nasopharynx, and it is still the most common cause of meningitis in the United States, then it has to be an opportunistic pathogen. Number 7 is Streptococcus agalactiae, also gram-positive coccus. This is in Lancefields group B. It is normal flora in the vaginal tract of the mother, but if it passes to the baby at birth, it can cause a very serious meningitis, and we call it group B strep. Number 8, again, Streptococcus, gram-positive coccus, Streptococcus mutans. This is the number 1 organism associated with tooth decay. Organism number 9, Clostridium botulinum, causes botulism. It is a disease of the nervous system. Even though we refer to botulism as food poisoning, it is still a disease that affects the nervous system. You know that all the Clostridium organisms are endospore formers, exotoxin producers, obligate anaerobes, and gram-positive bacilli. With Clostridium botulinum, the paralysis you get, or the way it affects the nervous system, is with a flaccid paralysis, meaning that the nerve stimulation is blocked. So it's a flaccid paralysis. Number 10, Clostridium Tec-9. Also the same things apply that applied to Clostridium botulinum. Nervous system disorder, exotoxin, endospore former, obligate anaerobe, gram-positive bacillus. But this one, it also affects the nervous system, causes a spastic paralysis of the nervous system. And we know that you do take an immunization for Clostridium Tec-9. It's the T in the DTaP, or whatever, however you want to put the initials in there, DPT. It's the T for tetanus, and it's a toxoid immunization, so they're immunizing you against the exotoxin, not against the bacteria, but against the exotoxin. That's what a toxoid immunization is. So remember to make sure and go back and look over your previous notes from exotoxins and endotoxins, as well as endospores and encapsulation, like we talked about. The endospores we talked about with this one, but encapsulation we talked about with Streptococcus Pneumoniae, that it was encapsulated. So review your notes on those things so you'll know what they mean. Clostridium Perfringens causes gas gangrene. Same things apply. The endospores, in this case, get into the tissue, and when they germinate back to the vegetative Clostridium Perfringens cells, they produce gas, and it causes necrosis of the tissue, and the exotoxin moves very fast. In number 12, Haemophilus influenza, you matched it to 23. This is a gram-negative bacillus that for many years, was the number 1 cause of bacterial meningitis in children. However, the Hib vaccine, which is based on proteins in the wall of the gram-negative bacillus, Haemophilus influenza, has almost eliminated Haemophilus influenza meningitis. So it's been a real breakthrough. Number 13, Bacillus anthracis. This is the organism that causes anthrax. It is an endospore former. If you remember, the 2 most common endospore formers are Clostridium and Bacillus. Bacillus anthracis causes anthrax, and Bacillus is an endospore former. Bordetella pertussis is number 14, and we get it from other humans that have it. It causes whooping cough. Whooping cough. Bordetella is actually one of the organisms that we immunize to, and remember that you got to know the whole name, Bordetella pertussis, because I may use just Bordetella to talk about whooping cough on the test, and you want to make sure you know that it's the genus Bordetella and the species Pertussis that causes whooping cough. and you actually get it from humans that have the organism. Number 15 is Corynebacterium Diphtheriae, and it is also part of the immunization, and I just messed up here, also part of the immunization sequence, and hang on, let me see if I can fix this. There we go. I'm sorry. Corynebacterium Diphtheriae causes diphtheria. It is also part of the immunization sequence. It is the D, just like Bordetella pertussis was the T. Was the P in the immunization. So the DPT or DTaP is for diphtheria, tetanus, which was number 10, organism number 10, and number 14, pertussis. Make sure you know that. Diphtheria is also one that is a toxoid immunization, and it causes diphtheria. And that's pretty much all we need to know about it, I think. Uh-oh, now I got it going, hadn't I? Okay, Vibrio cholera. Vibrio cholera causes the disease cholera. One of the things that we associate with it is rice water stews, and that's when they pass out chunks of the mucus with the water with the little white chunks in it. Sometimes we see cholera in the Gulf Coast region from the oyster bars and all. So for that reason, I'm not a big fan of eating raw seafood or sushi or any of that stuff. But it is a gastroenteritis, and the gastroenteritis is called cholera, and rice water stews are associated with this organism. Number 17 is Mycobacterium tuberculosis. We know a lot about it. Causes TB, and it contains a special mycolic acid substance in the wall that is a wax substance and that is responsible for the acid-fast stain. So Mycobacterium tuberculosis, TB. Number 18 is Mycobacterium leprae. It causes leprosy. You matched it to 32. We've not studied leprosy throughout the semester, so there will be a pretty good question on it on the test. We know that it is the only pathogen of the peripheral nervous system. That's very important. Only pathogen of the peripheral nervous system is Mycobacterium leprae. It has a slow generation time of 12 to 14 days, which is a long time. So that means one cell makes two in 12 to 14 days. It has a low growth temperature, and that means it likes lower temperatures than what we normally think about, and it has never been grown on artificial media. They have to use living tissue for it to grow. They used to use the feet pads of mice. Now they actually use armadillos to grow it because they found out that armadillos actually carry a form similar to leprosy that we know as human leprosy. It is not very contagious. Most people don't die from leprosy, but actually die from infection or things associated with it. Treponema Pallidum. Oh, one more thing on leprosy that's very important. You get leprosy when some sort of exudate or oozing, either from the nose or the sores, comes in contact with an individual's nasal mucosa. So someone that's infected has to pass the organism to someone who is not infected by contact, direct contact. Remember that, direct contact of the exudate with the nasal mucosa. You can't, sniff it or ingest it or any of that. It has to be a direct contact for transmission to occur. Now, Treponema Pallidum is number 19. This is the organism that causes syphilis, and it is a spirochete, and it has an axial filament, and that's what allows it to invade tissues. Cryptococcus neoformans, number 20, is a fungus, and it causes fungal meningitis. This one is actually carried and passed out in the feces of the birds. It's a large oval cell if you look at it on the gram stain. 21 are the organisms that cause malaria: Plasmodium falciparum, Plasmodium vivax, Plasmodium ovale. These are the malaria causers. And the Anopheles mosquito is the definitive host of this organism because that's where sexual reproduction occurs. And humans are the intermediate host because that's where the asexual life cycle portion of Plasmodium occurs. 22, we omitted. 23, Herpes Simplex 1. This one causes cold sores, fever blisters. It is a member of the herpes family, which is a family of latent viruses. Once you get the infection, you keep it in the body in some place. Herpes simplex 1, cold sores, fever blisters, it is latent in the trigeminal nerve after the initial exposure. Borrelia burgdorferi causes Lyme disease. It is carried by ticks. You get it from the bite of a tick. The bacteria is injected when the tick bites you. Number 25, Toxoplasma Gondii is a review question as a review organism. Remember that it is acquired by the adult through ingestion of cat feces. It is asymptomatic in the adult, so they don't know they have it, but it is a protozoan. It's a protozoan, so it is acquired through ingestion of cat feces. If it passes to a baby, then it can cause severe congenital defects in the child. And the problem is the parent or the mother is asymptomatic and does not know she has it. It is a protozoan. And you get it through how? Ingestion. Okay, omit number 26. Francisella tularensis is number 27. It causes a disease known as tularemia. This is a bacteria. Tularemia, and you get it from rabbits or other small mammals. Omit 28. 29 is Staphylococcus aureus. It causes boils, carbuncles, pimples. It can cause just about anything if it gets where it shouldn't be. It is normal flora on the skin in some instances, and also on the in the nasopharynx of individuals, and it causes a gastroenteritis if it gets on food that is not reheated before eating, such as cream pies, hams, anything that you don't reheat. So the Staphylococcus aureus is passed from the nasopharynx to the food, and it sits on the food and produces its toxin. It has an early onset of 8 to 12 hours, a short duration of 24 hours, and a mortality rate of 0. Number 30, Staphylococcus epidermis. This is the most common microorganism on the skin. Propionibacterium acnes is number 13. This causes acne, which is the number 1 skin disease in the United States. It is also normal flora and breaks down sebum, and when we have too much sebum or too much production by the sebaceous glands of sebum, then there's more sebum for this organism to break down, and the breakdown products, one of which are fatty acids, causes the true red, hardening, knotty feeling cystic acne that we see a lot of times in teenagers. So it's a normal flora organism, but it does cause acne, which is the #1 skin disease in the United States. Number 32 is Listeria Monocytogenes. This one is a gram-positive bacillus. It causes meningitis in children, but it's acquired from the mother ingesting the organism, and it passes from the mother's blood to the placenta to the nervous system of the child. So it may not show up immediately, so the notes say failing to thrive 1 month old. It may show up later. The organism Listeria monocytogenes is a psychotroph. It is not slowed down by refrigeration. And we associate it with Bluebell ice cream because it's the organism that caused the recall. Lately, this week and last week, there has been a big recall of hummus for the same reason, Listeria monocytogenes. It seems like it is getting more and more frequent in recalls. Hot dogs, anything that is refrigerated, this organism, because it is a psychotroph, doesn't slow down during the refrigeration process. So I told someone the other day it'll always be the Bluebell ice cream organism. But it does cause meningitis and failing to thrive babies. Escherichia coli is number 34. It's a gram-negative bacillus. It is normal flora in the gastrointestinal tract. There are many mutations of it that can cause issues. One of them is gastroenteritis if the organism is acquired, the mutated form. What I put on your test for you to I put on the notes to include for test is it is the #1 cause of urinary tract infections. E. coli, #1 for urinary tract infections, normal flora in gastrointestinal tract. Many different mutations of it occur. Rickettsia rickettsii is bacteria that also is carried by tick. It causes Rocky Mountain spotted fever. So it's a tick-borne organism. Chlamydia trachomatis, this organism causes trachoma, which is the #1 cause of blindness in the world. 37 is Varicella-Zoster. This causes chicken pox at the first manifestation of the virus. If you first acquire it, you get chicken pox. Later, the virus, which has been lying dormant in nerve root ganglia near the base of the spine, may reactivate as shingles. So chicken pox and shingles are part of the herpes family of viruses. Microsporum trichophyton, epidermophyton, these organisms cause ringworm. Remember that tinea is the Latin word for ringworm. It is not one of the organisms that causes ringworm. The organisms are Microsporum trichophyton and epidermophyton. They are called dermatophytes because they infect hair, skin, and nails. Number 39, Pasteurella multocida. This is an organism that we see in an abscess caused from a dog bite. It's responsible for the abscess from the dog bite. Pasteurella multocida. Number 40 is Candida albicans. This is a yeast. It is normal flora, human normal microbiota, but is opportunistic and responsible for thrush and also for vaginitis. Number 41, Histoplasma capsulatum. Histoplasma is a fungus, and it is not carried by birds, but we associate it with birds because it likes to use bird droppings for nutrients. So we find this fungus growing a lot where there's lots of bird droppings. Number 42 is the Rhabdo virus. This is the virus that causes rabies, and hydrophobia is a common cause of it. They have an unnatural fear of water. One of the interesting things about the rabies virus is that the long incubation period of the virus is responsible for post-exposure vaccination. In other words, you can get vaccinated after you have been bitten. It is a virus of the nervous system, usually acquired through mammals or even humans. So the long incubation period of the virus is responsible for post-exposure vaccination to be a possibility. Number 43 is the polio virus, and you get it from ingestion of water contaminated with feces. It is a nervous system, of course, and one of the interesting things to me about it is that you can acquire it in that way. The Salk vaccine was the first one that came out. The Salk vaccine used a dead virus, 3 injections, and a booster. Later, Sabin came out with the Sabin vaccine, which was an oral vaccine, and the virus, the reason could be done orally and without a booster was the virus was alive, but had it been inactivated, so that it was not supposed to be able to cause the disease, but it still caused the immunity to be strong enough so that you did not need a booster. So the Sabin was 3 orals, an inactivated but living virus, and no booster. Number 44 is echoviruses. You match them to 44. This is the group of viruses that are the most common cause of viral meningitis in the United States. And in the case of meningitis, viral meningitis is more common but usually less severe.